Good afternoon, everybody, and good evening for those that are in most time zones in Canada. My name is Jennifer West, and I am the host of Take Note. This is the Muse West Concerts podcast. Our editor is Josh Short. And friends, this is my final episode. So it has been a lot of fun to have musical guests and talk about music with them and life. And I just want to say thank you all for listening. And I think we've saved a really cool podcast conversation for the end. It is my honor to welcome Sean Wang all the way from Toronto. Um, he didn't have to fly here for this conversation. Zoom brought him, Zoom Air. And Sean is a wonderful violinist, musicologist, and we're going to find out a bit more about him and the work he's done with Interwoven. Sean, how are you doing today?
Fine, thank you. Thank you, Jen, for having me. It's an honor to be on your last episode of
Thank
this.
you. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. And our first question is going to be a little bit just to get to know you. And that's the part where we're going to start recording. So just bear with us here. All right. Thank you, Zoom. So, first question is, when you were in school, what was your least favorite subject? Math, English, or science?
It was actually English because I wasn't good at it. English is my
Okay.
second language.
Okay. So English was not your favorite class to go to.
No, it wasn't.
Okay. Next question, rapid fire. If you had to pick between Baroque violin or modern violin, which would you pick?
Modern violin.
Oh, that was pretty easy for you to answer. Maybe we'll dig into that.
Yes, please do.
Okay. Another difficult question. Night market food or dim sum?
Dim sum.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And another food-based question. Milk tea with taro or fruit flavored boba?
Fruit flavor boba.
Okay, there we go. And this one is a bit trickier, but there is a right answer.
Uh-huh.
What is your favorite work for string sextet?
For string sextet, it's gotta be
Yes.
Brahms's sextet number one, opus 36, G major. That's my favorite piece. One of my
Okay. Well, the right answer was Souvenir de Florence, but it's okay.
Oh, all right. Okay.
That's good. Brahms is amazing too. All right. So, my first question is where did you grow up and what effect did that have on the person you became?
What do you mean by growing up? Like up to what?
Childhood.
Okay, that would be 21, 18.
It totally depends on the person, doesn't it?
It kind of does. Well, I was born and raised in Taiwan until I was 14 years old. That was when I went to the States to study by
Hmm.
myself.
Okay.
And so if you talk about growing up, it's really two countries we are talking about. So growing up in Taiwan gave me a really good foundation in ear training
Hmm.
in music theory, and both my parents were music teachers, piano teachers. So had a ton of exposure to the mainstream pieces, piano pieces by Beethoven, Mozart, and Chopin, Schumann. So that gave me a really firm, solid foundation in music in general, not just violin playing. And then when I went to the States to study on my own, of course, all of that got further, um, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Just I became more educated, basically.
Hmm. I've actually heard the National Symphony or Orchestra of Taiwan, and it is fabulous.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
They played Tchaikovsky 5, and I was very moved. So
Mhm.
there are some seriously wonderful musicians from Taiwan, for
Okay.
sure. Um, when you were growing up, was it pretty obvious to you early on that music is what you wanted to do, or did you want to be something else?
I never wanted to be something else. It was really obvious to me until I got my master's from the Juilliard School. That was when I started having doubts. But we can go into that later if you like.
If you're comfortable with it.
Uh, sure, sure. I had nothing to hide really. Um, Growing up, it was just very obvious to me. Music was what I loved and what I was good at. I started out as a pianist and I didn't switch to the violin until I was well, 6, but that because of a short illness, I had to restart violin when I was 8 years old.
Hmm.
So in any case, I play both piano and violin up until I was 12. That was when I really decided to just focus on violin.
You had to pick one for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, one can do one. It's possible to do both, but I just liked the violin more. So my mother says I really, frankly, don't remember.
That's fun. Um, so you wanted to be serious about music from a pretty young age, and actually that's quite common in classical music. A lot of people say, like, I knew a long time ago. I didn't know when I was 19. I knew like really early.
Right.
So
With music, that's usually the case.
mhm. It takes a lot of sacrifice. So I think people have to know when they're young that this is the path I'm going to take.
Yeah. Well, if you love enough, you don't see it as a sacrifice, right?
Mhm.
And
That's
especially
true.
when you are that young.
That's true for sure. And you have a degree in musicology, a
Mhm.
PhD. So I have a few listeners that aren't going to know what that is. What is musicology?
Musicology, generally speaking, is just the academic study of music. And when we talk about just this term musicology, we're really referring to the systematic study of Western art music and its history, uh, analysis of the repertoire, biographies of Western art music composers.
Mhm.
Yeah, it encompasses a lot of subdisciplines, and oftentimes they uh, you know, can include more than just music itself.
Mhm. For
It
sure.
touch upon fields like philosophy and sociology, and depending on which division of musicology you want to focus on.
So that's my next question is how do you distinguish musicology from ethnomusicology?
Now, when we say ethnomusicology, usually we are referring to the study of non-Western music in their original cultural context.
Okay.
And with ethnomusicology, uh, you basically study the function of music within a social context. So, generally speaking, this is just a very gross generalization. But oftentimes we are dealing with not so much, how a particular musical genre developed, but more about how that music functions in that culture's daily life, for example.
Okay. That
So
actually helps.
yeah, there is that distinction, but these days, uh, it, it, the gray zone is ever expanding, I feel, right?
I'm
Because
sure.
the mentality, if you stick with this strict delineation, you have musicology, which is like the Western, like the real thing, and then outside of that, you have ethnomusicology.
Mhm.
That was sort of the implication for a long time, and nowadays that distinction is no longer so obvious.
Because I would consider Bartok and Kodai to be ethnomusicologists,
For
even
sure.
though Hungary is considered a, well, it's kind of right on the border, but it's mostly considered Western art music.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, Bartok was one of the first and also the best ethnomusicologists, and he was able to just take musical elements from musics of that region and transform them into a modernist language that he was, known for,
mhm,
that he became known for.
for sure. I actually just got back from a trip to Hungary, And in Hungary, we call him Bela Bacsi, Uncle Bela.
Oh, Bela Baci.
Bela Bacsi, yeah, he's all of our uncles over there, that's for sure. And I know he worked closely with Kodai, and I'm wondering, like in the modern age,
Yeah.
I wonder if they would have had permission to record the people in the village that they recorded. It just comes up in my head, like, did he have permission to record these people? And what were his research methods? It's so curious to me.
That's a good question. I don't know if he actually asked them permission, but I would imagine, for somebody to enter villages, you would need permission of some sort to
Mhm.
be there, right? And I'm sure those people were happy to share their music with him and to have their voice and music recorded. But as for permission, that's a good question. I'd like to look into that myself.
Yeah. And that actually leads to my next question is what are some of the ethical issues that researchers face in musicology or ethnomusicology?
Ethical questions these days. What we are concerned about, at least me personally, and in the music history classes that I teach, I talk a lot about cultural appropriation and what it means. And at what point does appropriation, or it goes both ways, I guess.
Mhm.
At what point does appreciation become appropriation, right? And uh, and that actually opens a huge can of worms because you get questions like, for example, say you've got a piece written for, say, shamisen and string quartet, right?
Imagine that.
Imagine that, which we just performed in Vancouver with Interwoven 3 weeks ago. Uh, and so the piece we played is by Michael Ippolito, who's a very, prominent composer, and he knows what he's doing,
Mhm.
the piece, right? But one question that some people might ask is, what gives you uh, the authority to write a piece with that combination? Because you're not Asian. Are you
Mhm.
appropriating their music? Now, depending on who you ask, depending on which country you're in, like in some European countries, this is a non-issue. You appreciate something, you you just go ahead and use your imagination to create something new. But
Mhm.
in North America, that's not exactly the way we think these days. So then you face questions of uh, cancel culture, for example. A few years ago, there was a production of Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado in New York City that got canceled because people just thought, that the whole operetta is making fun of Japanese culture.
Mhm.
But then again, Gilbert and Sullivan makes fun of everybody.
They really do, actually.
So, right? So, I mean,
Mostly white people they're making fun of.
all of themselves, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you go down that path, how many works are you going to end up canceling? How about half of Puccini's output? Madame Butterfly, you have Toronto, and you have say
Mhm.
these Aida needs to be canceled because he was no Egyptian. He knew nothing about ancient Egyptian music,
Mhm.
right?
And Saint-Saëns was not Israeli, so he doesn't know about Samson and Delilah.
That's right. That's right. And so, yeah, it's actually a much bigger question than what this podcast allows for a solid discussion. But uh,
It's true.
yeah, but these days that's an important topic. So at the Royal Conservatory, where I'm the academic director of the Glenn School, when I got here 2 years ago, I implemented a course, a breadth course for our undergrads called Cultural Appropriation versus Appreciation. And
Okay.
I'm not teaching that course. There's another expert who is in charge of that. But it's just one area that I think is important for us to talk about. In Canada, we have a lot of indigenous cultures and the composers who are genuinely interested in their music, but one can't just freely borrow elements
It's
and
true. And
make them
there's
something.
been a lot of composers accused of that. R. Murray Schafer, Harry Somers.
Mhm.
So it's been interesting to see as a piano teacher which works of Debussy have been removed from the RCM syllabus
Yeah.
that have very controversial titles for today.
Mhm.
And I think some pieces do need to be removed. There's no need for them to stay. But what I find when I was visiting Europe in March, when I spoke to some of my friends who are musicians there, they asked, "Have you guys all gone crazy in North America? You're canceling everything."
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Oh, I don't know. Let's dig into this." And I found after a few of these conversations, because a lot of them were like, boy, it's not the same over here. We're just programming whatever.
Right.
And I think there's just a different viewpoint. Like you said, it would really depend where you are.
Right. Well, you see, with Debussy and Puccini and Verdi and Bizet, all these people, like I'd say half the famous 19th century European composers, they appreciated East Asian music, or let's just say non-Western music. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In Debussy's case, he was, of course, obsessed with gamelan music. And his idea of the Oriental is really concocted in that uh, there is the West and there's the Far East, and everything in the Far East is just one thing. In I think 1914, he thought about writing a ballet set in Taiwan, but for a Malaysian ensemble. I am
Oh,
from Taiwan. Uh, I've never been to Malaysia. They
okay.
speak different language.
They
The
do.
instruments are different. They have different musical traditions. So, for us, we go, what? They're two separate cultures. But for Europeans in 1895, they didn't know the difference, right? The Far East is just somewhere mysterious, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you cannot really accuse them of being insensitive or being racist
Mm-hmm.
because it's like us criticizing the practice of bloodletting. We know it doesn't work, it doesn't do anybody any good, but that was the practice for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
We now know better, but you have to see this in its historical context because that was how Europeans thought. And Debussy was part of that society. You could not expect somebody like him to just kind of emancipate from that cultural context, right? So it's unfair to just criticize him and to cancel some pieces he wrote as a result of this admiration for East Asian music. That is unfair. And think about it. Without that step, how could we have gotten to where we are today? Right? These things don't just happen overnight. Thoughts need to be developed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cultures, traditions, customs. So treat that, I would say, with most historical compositions that we think are racist. Yes, some go a little bit too far. True,
For sure.
for sure, but not all of them, right?
I think our difficult job as arts administrators or music teachers or music scholars, I'm not a music scholar, but you are, is to kind of swim through these ideas.
Yeah,
And what I'm actually really loving about this conversation is that there is no right answer.
there isn't.
There isn't, except for Souvenir de Florence, because that is the best string sextet.
The best string sextet. Okay, that's fine.
It's still an opinion. It's an opinion. It's okay.
That's fine with me. The next.
um, have you heard the Ying Quartet's recording of that piece, by the way?
No, I've not actually.
Okay. 10 out of 10 recommend.
Yeah, the
Yep.
Incortech.
Yeah,
That's
it
good.
was my weekend listening and it was just
Great.
perfect. It was
Yeah,
literally perfect.
nice.
Um, Speaking of all things string playing,
Mhm.
you get to go to a nice little place called Cremona in the summers
Right,
with our mutual friend Derek Chu.
right.
Hi, Derek, in Calgary. um, so Italy is basically one of the most wonderful places ever. Um, for a violinist, what is it like being in Cremona?
It's a special place for
Mhm.
violinists, of course. We know that the greatest string instruments were built there, ones by Stradivarius, by Cornelius, by, this is a whole dynasty of great violin makers. So being there and seeing the streets that they have walked down and the church that they had all worshipped in, that's really a special feeling, of course.
I remember the churches in Italy just being fantastic. You turn around and there's a fresco by Raphael.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, who did this fresco? Oh, of course, why not? Do you have any favorite food you like to eat when you're in Cremona?
Cremona has its own cuisine, actually. Uh, and of course, now I don't remember exactly what those dishes are, but I just remember everything being just fresh and
Mm-hmm.
delicious because they're cooked well and because the ingredients are so fresh, right? No like canned tomatoes and stuff like that, processed
Oh,
cheese. No, they
oh
don't.
no. That's actually one of the that's a sin in Italy. You
That's
go
a
to straight
sin.
to the priest for that. That's confession
Right.
for sure.
Yeah.
So what kind of violin do you play on?
I have a Antoniazzi made in Milan in 1912. The
Beautiful.
Antoniazzi family was originally from Cremona, but they moved to Milan, which is not that far away.
Mhm.
Established their own school of violin making there, and
Wonderful.
it's a wonderful violin. I love it.
That's great. And what do you have for a bow? Is it French?
I have a French bow, an American bow. I have two French bows, and I also have an old English bow. I love them all. They're different. Though I need
Eh,
to say, this idea that all Italian violinists are best and all French bows are best and even better if you have, an Italian violin in your left hand and a French bow in your right hand. Well, again, the that's just a generalization because there are these days amazing American-made and Canadian-made instruments.
mhm.
And what does it mean to be Italian anyway? What if you are a Korean-born uh, a violin maker who studied in Cremona for 30 years and say, and also been living there for 30 years? What is the instrument that do you make Korean instruments or is it it's hard to say, right?
Critical thinking people. This is what we're here for on this podcast is that like and this is what I love about Interwoven, your project with my best friend Keiko.
Yes.
Um, gosh, did she tell some stories at the concert? Oh, Keiko.
And she's
So
great at telling stories too.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, she sure is. And there's more she could have told, but
Mhm.
she held them in, thankfully. So what I love is that there seems with Interwoven to be like this always asking questions. What does it mean to be Asian? What does it mean Western music? What is Eastern? Why these random distinctions? Why are they happening? And can we break the mold?
Yeah. That is the goal. Just to give you a little bit of background. Uh, so I first met Keiko. When did I meet Keiko? Was it before or after the pandemic? I think it was just. right after the pandemic, I believe, they gave their first concert. Interwoven gave their first concert. And I didn't know who Keiko was, but I was friends with Yoko and Hikaru, who are
Hmm.
both members of Interwoven. So they told me about this person, Keiko, who started this wonderful ensemble called Interwoven. And before that, that was back in 2014. I was already kind of interested in this kind of, East meets West type of ensemble. So I started a nonprofit in New York City called the New York Intercultural Music Society. So that ran in earnest for about 2 years. Then I got a job in Boston. So, the organization still was there, but nothing really was happening, though I had many ideas and projects that I wish that I had time to just um, to realize.
Hmm.
So I met Keiko. And I was very excited because I think she and I think alike in terms of this uh, uh, promotion of music that combines both Western and East Asian musical elements. So I introduced myself and I told her about stuff that I'm interested in. Yeah, and then we just started collaborating. Then so now I'm co-director, co-artistic director of Interwoven. And hopefully now I'm in charge of the soon to happen Canadian branch of Interwoven.
Oh,
Yeah,
are you allowed to say more?
I don't have more to share, unfortunately, because right now it's just an idea.
Okay. Keep keep everybody informed because I
Yeah,
have to say, like, it was such a wonderful musical experience.
right. Thank you.
I felt so thrilled that this was the final musical experience I was able to offer as artistic director to the audience.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, for those on the podcast who don't know, I'm retiring. I'm so excited though. If you can't hear it in my voice, I'm looking forward to supporting the arts around me in a different way. So it's going to be good. Um, okay, so this question about interwoven leads me into a new topic. What
Mhm.
can Western classically trained musicians learn from by being in intercultural collaborations?
That's a big question.
Hmm.
And I want to give you a straightforward answer. And that is, it goes without saying that by knowing more about instruments and musics from other cultures, you simply just become more cosmopolitan, you become more appreciative of what's outside of your comfort zone, if you will, right? Just gain a broader view of different cultures. But what me personally, what I'm interested in is introducing uh, new possibilities in terms of timbre, in terms of musical technique. Because by introducing non-Western instruments to the mix, uh, more can be created. And we're just scratching the surface right now. There's a lot more that can be really delved into. So that is personally my uh one of the things that I wish to introduce to audiences.
For sure. And the more places we travel, the more languages we learn, and the more music we experience, the more we become aware of the people around us. And I just found that, like, the audience that came to Interwoven was the most interesting blend of people.
Mhm.
And there were so many different people who hadn't been there before. There were people that love chamber music, and there were people who love, um, you know, uh, Chinese music. So it was a real variety. And I think that Interwoven has done more than scratch the surface. We're waiting for the first full album. Is that going to happen?
It will happen soon. Yeah, we'll keep applying for grants.
Good.
But we also want to do it carefully and methodically. And by that, I mean, you don't just mix stuff together. One
No.
analogy I love to use is food. You don't just mix different food ingredients together, right? Because
Hmm.
food needs to be palatable. It needs to be,
Especially in Italy.
especially in Italy. So if you're in Cremona and you are served uh, a plate of freshly cooked pasta, you don't just put random stuff on it, right? It's got to be things that go well with the dish. So the
Hmm.
same with music. You can just throw random things together. It won't work. It requires a lot of careful thoughts and sensitivity. So do a good job.
It is, yeah. And an album is like it's it's really a statement about who the ensemble is and what they believe in. So
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
You have been teaching for a while now, and as I've been a teacher in school for wow, 16 years already. That doesn't seem possible, but the math doesn't lie. Um, I often get asked by younger colleagues, "What's your advice for me?" And my advice is to quit. Just kidding. Just kidding. um, what is your advice to young violinists, young conductors, young music scholars?
Mhm.
You said there was a time when you stepped away from music. I
Yeah,
will
they were.
leave you space to talk about that. Maybe that helps you give advice to young people now.
That's actually directly related to my advice, and that is there'll be difficulties
Hmm.
in this field. And I'd say maybe 9 out of 10 experiences for young musicians are less than positive. There'll be rejections. There'll be many, many rejections. It doesn't matter how good you are. And sometimes these rejections happen and they have absolutely nothing to do with your ability, right? So you have to learn to just focus on what you love doing and not get distracted by all these negativities. That was the lesson that I learned the hard way. I didn't know that. So after the Juilliard school, I had the wonderful education at Juilliard as a conductor, but the teacher was incredibly strict. And I was 20 years old. I didn't quite know how to handle that pressure. So instead of just staying on course, I decided to not deal with music anymore. I wouldn't say it was a mistake, but it just took a little longer than it should have for me to get back to music. So I
I think
wasted
sometimes a
a few
break is
years.
good.
Sometimes a break is good, but sometimes when you are still in your formative years, you cannot afford to take 2 years off because that actually can. It depends on the situation, of course, too, right?
Do you find that a lot of younger music students have pretty high expectations of what this career will give them? And then they find out they find out the truth?
What do you mean by that? Like how difficult it is to become yo-yo ma?
Sure, Yo-Yo Ma, Gil Shaham, name a
Yeah,
name.
right, right. And there actually aren't that many names. Well, that if that happens, great. If you end up having a career like Yo-Yo Ma, congratulations. That's wonderful. But there are also a lot of musicians who are maybe as capable, and uh the standards are just as high, but for whatever reason, they just don't quite have that career. That doesn't mean that you are not successful because you are still contributing a great deal.
Exactly. I would encourage, oh, it's gonna get emotional on this last podcast. I would encourage young musicians to redefine success. Maybe just getting ready for the audition was a success.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it need not be so narrow because
Hmm.
success is hard to define. If you become the concert master of a major orchestra, sure, that is success. But what if you decide to, go into, I don't know, let's say generative AI music, and somehow you become an authoritative, an authority in that field. That is success too.
Hmm.
There are many possibilities for art
Yeah.
administrator. The
Yeah.
good one makes all the difference.
It's true.
Mhm.
Who have been some of your important professional mentors?
I'd say my teachers, my violin teacher, Raphael Druyan, who was George Sell's concertmaster in the Cleveland Orchestra. He was a
Wow.
strict. I studied theory and counterpoint with Jacques-Louis Manon, who was one of Messiaen's last pupils. And
Oh,
my conducting teacher, Otto Werner Mueller, who was for 20, 30 years the most famous conducting pedagogue in North America. So they all had tremendous influence on my growth as a musician.
hmm. So your violin teacher got you ready for all those concertmaster excerpts for sure.
Actually, he didn't.
Okay.
Yeah,
Who
uh,
got you ready for Scheherazade?
none of them did.
You did it on your own, didn't you?
Yeah, what he was focused on slightly different things. His take on all that was, I'm going to teach you the essence of music and what you want to do in your career. That is really up to you. But my job is to teach you music.
Yeah. And
That was
that's kind of the difference when you get to like the conservatory level is you're going to make your own independent choices now.
right. Yeah.
Hmm.
So in a way, it wasn't really practical education, if you know what I mean. But
Yeah,
now in music, I know how things work. And yeah.
definitely. Definitely. So it has been a wonderful conversation with Sean Wong all the way in Toronto via Air Zoom flight number. How many Zoom meetings are happening in the world right now? We don't know.
Right.
Um, Sean, how can you tell when a violist is playing out of tune?
Oh, that's a joke, isn't it? Wow.
The bow is moving.
Oh gosh. Now, see,
Yeah.
I'm in a position to tell viola jokes because I also play viola. I taught viola, uh, the post-secondary level. So I feel like I'm in a position to tell you a few, and I have one.
Yes, please. Okay, let's
Uh,
hear it.
what is the similarity between lightning and a violist's fingers?
Okay, I actually know this one.
Oh, this one? Okay.
Tell our
Yeah,
audience though.
yeah. They never strike the same place twice.
Did you hear that, Andy? We're sending this to Andy Lynn, who always strikes the same note in the same place because he's an amazing violist.
Right, he's not
However,
your typical violist, I guess.
no, he's not.
Yeah, I have another one. This is a little bit longer. So there's this um experienced violist who's nearing retirement age. He spent his whole career playing the very back of the viola section of an orchestra. So he prays to God one day, dear God, my career is about to come to an end, and I really would like to just have a little bit more recognition as a musician. So what can you do for me? God thinks about it and said, okay, you know what? I'm going to move you up two desks so you get to sit in the middle of the viola section. So okay, that's a good idea. So he spends the next few weeks in the middle of the viola section, and then he gets a little, unhappy again, and he prays to God again. Dear God, is there something you can do for me just a little bit more? Because, I'm about to retire. I really would like to just, be more and more visible to the audience. Okay? God says, all right, okay, how about this? I'll make you the principal of the viola section. So whew, he's now the principal of the viola section. So he's happy, but after a few weeks, he's unhappy again. Dear God, I spent my whole life just playing this inner voice, it's not that satisfying. It's anything you can do for me, anything. God is, are you sure you want me to do this? Like, yes, 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 of course. And being principal of the VR section is great, but there's got to be something else you can do. God says, okay. So guess what? Now this guy is sitting in the back of the second violin section.
Oh, the poor violists that have to survive. And he put him at the back of the seconds. God, like, literally, oh no.
Right.
Oh, I feel there's a fifth gospel coming on here, Sean. The fifth book of the gospel.
Right.
Do you have any messages in Mandarin for any Taiwanese listeners?
For any Taiwanese,
We have a
uh,
few.
yeah, in Mandarin. Oh, I'm not sure if I can think of any off the top of my head.
It's hard to switch languages in the middle of a conversation.
And plus, I left Taiwan when I was 14, and so my Mandarin is actually not that good.
Really? Okay.
I can get
See,
by fine, in everyday situations, but
yeah, my Mandarin's terrible too.
like yours is good.
Oh, I don't think so. That's very kind of you.
Mm.
See, friends, this is why we do these podcasts because you get to learn all about people. Yeah, you learn new things by having great conversations. Sean, you're my final podcast guest. That is pretty cool.
What an honor, really.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank
It has
you.
been a pleasure, audience, to have been your podcast host since 2022 or 2021. Um, our podcast editor is sitting across from me, Josh. Thank you for always taking out the stupid noises I make when I bang a glass of water on the table during the podcast. And there's no water here today, Sean, because I was like, no, no, I'm not going to be tempted to like drink my water and put it down.
Mhm.
So thanks again to Sean Wang for being my esteemed guest today. Go find Interwoven and listen to them. Follow them on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and everything else. So thanks again, Sean, and thank you to our audience, and thank you to our sponsor, Tom Lee Music. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.